Good morning and welcome to Peggy's Place. I'm your host today, Leigh Anne Lindsey, and we are live also on YouTube. We are streaming around the globe at 88 at kgua.org. We're broadcasting at 88.3 FM in Molalla, California, which is on the Northern California coast at the junction of both Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And we've got a great guest waiting in the wings on Zoom, Linda McCabe, a sea rancher now full-time and also author of the Quest of the Warrior Maiden, and that's a trilogy. We're going to be talking to her about that in just a moment. I've got a few announcements to make first, and there is, it is springtime again when Surf Market opens up their barbecue. It's going to be running all day long, starting 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. They'll have the baby back ribs, chicken, and tri-tip. Stop by for some good old barbecue at Surf Market here in Molalla. And also ongoing today, Earth Day up at the Coast Community Library. Julia is giving out seeds and starts, and they're doing a giveaway and swap. That's 11 to 5 p.m. in Point Arena at the Coast Community Library. And speaking of the library, they headed into the Orange Tier Plan yesterday on Thursday, April the 22nd. And branches are open to the public now 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And there is a 50% capacity at the Coast branch, 24 people at a time. Curbside continues by phone request. There's a book drop also, and there are computers for 45 minutes maximum. And more information can be found out about the library at mindolibrary.org, or you can call them at 882-3114. And we've got some great art exhibits that are continuing this weekend at the Molalla Arts Center in Molalla, also at the Linden Design Gallery in the Sea Ranch. We had the two artists on yesterday during Peggy's Place, and they are Arun Patel, a photographer, and Keith Wilson, a painter, who combined forces during this last year of the pandemic to create some beautiful art. You've really got to take a look at that. Linden Design is open from 11 to 4 Saturday, and also by appointment by emailing lindendesign@me.com. And Linden is spelled Lyndon. And then the Molalla Arts is open daily, 11 to 4 p.m. Up at the Coast Highway Art Collective in Point Arena, they are open this weekend, Thursday through Sunday, and that's 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's weekly. They're open Thursday through Sunday. And they have an artist reception coming up May 1st, next Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, it's noon to 5 p.m. and then it's back to the regular hours, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Sunday. So be sure to join them for that opening next weekend, and also for their ongoing great art that they continue to carry there. And that now, oh wait, we've got one more announcement that Peggy just sent to me, and it's Goodbye Clothes up in Point Arena at 243 Main Street. And they are going to be open tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sure is great to see some of our places opening up again. And now that a lot of people are getting fully vaccinated, lots more freedom going forward. I want to tell you a little bit about the weather. It is 51 degrees outside. It looks like there might be a chance of some rain showers tomorrow, and definitely rain on Sunday. And it's gusting about 10 to 15 miles per hour out on the coast, winds coming steadily about 6 miles from the north. And joining us today on Peggy's Place, as I said before, is Linda McCabe, a new full-time sea rancher and author of the Charlemagne era-based fantasy trilogy, which started with Quest of the Warrior Maiden, which I've got right here with me so I can show people on YouTube this great book that I've been reading. And it was followed by Fate of the Saracen Knight. And now she's about to publish a third and final book in that trilogy. She received a master's degree as an historian of science from Sonoma State University, and loves to travel as soon as, of course, this past year has been really different, but she's definitely going to be traveling again, I am sure. And she went and did 2 trips, extended trips over to France, scouring the museums in Paris and trekking through medieval hilltop villages in the Midi-Pyrenees. And then the quest of the Warrior Maiden won the 2013 Bay Area Independent Publishers Association Award for Best Historic Fantasy. And she has been a member of the California Writers Club for more than a decade, almost 2 now, I think, and is a past president of the local branch, Redwood Writers, the largest branch of the California Writers Club. And she received the Jack London Service Award. And Jack London, she was telling me this morning, was one of the original members. Good morning, Linda.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Leigh Anne, for your kind introduction. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And Jack London was one of the first members.
Yes, he was. California Writers Club was originally founded in 1909. And for those unfamiliar with it, it is a writers club that is open to writers of all genres and has over 20 branches throughout the state of California. So we have poets and memoirists and technical writers and mystery writers, and it's good to cross-pollinate with writers of other genres as the genre lines are blending and blurring. So
Yes, and when I moved to Santa Rosa, coming back up from San Diego area, I really wanted to get back into my writing. And I remember going to the first meeting and meeting
Linda Reed?
Linda Reed, yes. And she was so welcoming, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it with all the different meetings that you could go to and workshops, writing workshops, so supportive. And I really enjoyed the story you were telling me this morning about when you were president back in 2003, how small the group was and what you did to actually increase the memberships.
Yes, it was at risk of closing by attrition. We had less than 40 members, and I'm just exaggerating a little, but the median age was probably about 78, and I was in my 30s at the time. So it was, and so we were trying to get more energy and more members. And one of the things that I noticed was that our branch had celebrated its 25th anniversary, and that hadn't been marked. So we wound up having a 30th anniversary celebration, and we did that in Glen Ellen in honor of Jack London. So we had it at the Jack London restaurant in Glen Ellen. And it was a great time. And we had a lot of the former past presidents at the dinner. And it was just a lot of fun. And that actually brought a lot of energy back. And we had a youth writing contest. And then under my presidency, we had our first anthology. It was a small tome, but we've had an anthology ever since, and we're just releasing a poetry anthology this month as well.
I was in one of those anthologies, and I enjoyed participating. It was a lot of fun, and you made also a difference in bringing back or actually initiating the anthologies, and with Kate Farrell's help and
Karen Batchelor.
Karen Batchelor, and that helped to bring more members in, as well as the workshops that you offered.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I love that background. Explain where that comes from.
Yeah.
Well, the people in our radio audience can't see it, but she has this beautiful image from the Charlemagne era, correct?
Well, it is a stained glass window from the Chartres Cathedral in France, and it is their Charlemagne window. And so for those that can see this, it says Carolus, which is the Latin for Carolus Magnus, which is where the Carolingian name comes from for the Charlemagne and his heirs. But it also is his father, Pepin le Bref, who started the Carolingian dynasty, which followed the Merovingian dynasty. So anyway, so I love anything Charlemagne and would take pictures of anything Charlemagne when I did my research trips in France. So,
well, I have really enjoyed my reading so far into this book. I wish I had actually read it earlier, but you're getting me back into reading. I don't know why, but I was a prolific reader for a long, long time. And then I just stopped reading. I don't know if it was the advent of the smartphone and, you know, how much time we spend on that, but I have just, like last night, I just turned the TV off and just kept reading.
oh, good.
And your research really comes through. I mean, you did extensive research to be able to put all the facts that you did in here. Tell us a little bit about what it took to get the research done just for this first book.
Okay.
And describe the book a little bit too.
Yeah, so my story is similar in tone to the legends of Arthur, except it's the legends of Charlemagne, which are not as popular today, but they were very popular for centuries. And these were tales from the south of France and north of Italy. And the first one that people will have possibly heard of, the one that's most famous, is the Song of Roland, Chanson de Roland. And that was retelling in a mythic way a real defeat by Charlemagne's army in the Roncesvalles Pass in the Pyrenees, where he had gone down to what is modern-day Spain. And then as he was leaving through the pass, the rear guard was attacked. And this was retold in the Song of Roland to being a mythic attack on the rear guard, and all of his knights, his paladins were killed. And Roland took his horn and blew on it to finally alert Charlemagne at the front that they were being under attack, when he realized that he could not survive himself. And he blew so hard, he blew his temples and they burst in blood. And it was just a magnificent death. And it was such a popular story that Roland could not remain dead. You know, the Hollywood sequels and movie makers have nothing on Roland coming back from the dead, and all the other paladins coming back from the dead and having new adventures and new stories and new villains, which is what the legends of Charlemagne were. And so my story, which I want to, if you can let me share my screen.
Yes, I will stop sharing screen now.
Okay.
For our YouTube watchers, I was putting up the images of the book and your Amazon page there, but I'll now let you share your screen.
I want to show people what my my source material is. This is 2 epic poems that were originally written in the Italian Renaissance that I am retelling for modern day audiences to take the boring parts out. Orlando Innamorato by Matteo Maria Boiardo and Orlando Furioso by Ludovico Ariosto. So these poets were marvelous storytellers, lousy historians, and even worse geographers. But let me stop sharing real quick. So I want to tell you how I first started reading Orlando Furioso. It's kind of a funny tale. I used to be involved in the online Harry Potter fandom.
I read that, yes.
And this was right after the 9/11 attacks, and the news was just too hard to deal with, and politics was too hard to deal with. So the first Harry Potter movie came out in 2001, and I started to read the novels and became just fascinated with it. And I got involved with debating with other adults about where we thought the story was going to go. And there was a theory bandied about with hippogriffs. And so since I already had a master's degree as a historian of science, when I started to try to follow this weird, wacky theory about hippogriffs being a symbol of love, I found out that the first time a hippogriff was used as a character in literature was in Orlando Furioso. I knew nothing about the poem, but doing research, I decided to read the entire poem to see how the hippogriff was used in context. That's the kind of researcher I am. Okay, so I started reading this poem.
It's what it takes.
Yes.
It's what it takes.
And I discovered this story between Bradamante and Ruggiero. Bradamante is the warrior maiden in my title, Quest of the Warrior Maiden. And she is a kick-ass warrior.
Boy, is she.
She is the niece of Charlemagne, and she is given commands. She's a commander, and she is revered as a warrior. And she meets and falls in love with a Saracen warrior who's descended from Hector of Troy. And they meet on the battlefield and fall in love, as you do. And
a real Romeo and Juliet piece there.
Yeah, Romeo and Joan of Arc type of thing.
Yes.
Yes. And so they meet, fall in love, and then are cruelly separated and have to work to get together with honor, since they are on opposing sides of a holy war. And she is sent on a quest to rescue her beloved, who is being held in a high tower by a wizard. And I remember as I was reading this, I was like, when was this written? And it was over 500 years ago, where a woman was given the call to adventure. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, Joseph Campbell, did he even know about this? Because he kept writing about the hero with 1,000 faces. And this was a woman, not the male hero, raised in obscurity. And so I was thinking of the call to adventure being put with an inverse. And I was so astounded by this. And as I finished reading Orlando Furioso, I remember being on the patio at work for lunch, finishing reading this and crying, because there was so much emotion at the ending of this poem for the love story of Bradamante and Ruggiero. And I felt cheated that I had never heard of this heroine before. I knew all about Guinevere and her messy love triangle with Lancelot and King Arthur that didn't end up well, but I knew nothing of Bradamante and Ruggiero. And I decided then to retell it for modern day audiences, because reading Orlando Furioso, there are a lot of boring parts in it. So I decided to adapt this for modern day audiences. And I made that decision back in 2005. And it's been a long time writing this. And so as I was doing my research and looking at those two big poems and trying to figure out what to keep and what to cut and where to put things, I realized how bad they were with geography. They're wonderful storytellers, lousy historians, even worse geographers. And so I'm going to show you a little of the screen again, and I'm going to desktop.
And while you're doing that, I want to remind our audience that you are listening to Linda McCabe, author of The Quest of the Warrior Maiden. And there's a trilogy. The second is Fate of the Saracen Knight that she was just talking about, Ruggiero. And also she has a new book coming out as well. This is Peggy's Place. I'm your host today, Leigh Anne Lindsey. We are on 88.3 FM along the coast here in Mendocino and Sonoma counties, on the Northern California coast. And we are streaming around the world at kgua.org. You can click on our Air Pocket app. We're also on other radio apps like Radio Garden and TuneIn. And Linda, now let's hear about what you've got up on your screen, at least for
Yes.
the YouTube watchers, but
Right.
also describe it for our radio listeners too.
Yes, and for people who have been to France, and it's a huge country, and the poets used the term poetic license very well. And so when I was going through the poems and trying to figure out where to put things, I realized that some of the things they did made no logical sense. For example, this is a story about a war that never took place. This was written just to entertain the patrons of the poets. And there was a war described between the North African Muslim army invading the Frankish Empire, which never happened. But they described the army as landing south of the Ebro River, which is in what we consider modern day Spain. And so that's south of Barcelona. And then the ships landed, the army came out, and then they went over the Pyrenees Mountains and joined a battle ongoing in a single day. Now, for anyone who's ever watched the Tour de France, when they're in the Pyrenees Mountains and you see how turny and twisty the roads are, and they're worse than Highway 1 coming up to the finish.
which is a feat to accomplish.
Yes, and you have mountains, and so trying to get wagons with the horses and everything over the Pyrenees Mountains, you couldn't do that in a day. You couldn't do that safely in a car going from Toulouse to Barcelona in a day without it, starting in dawn and ending at sundown. But to do all of that and then join a battle during the day, I'm like, no. So I had to change some of the aspects of that. They also, Ariosto also described a castle, and he had this enchanted castle, and there were many cantos in between when it appeared, and the second time and the third time it appeared, but it was in 3 different places. Once it started off, the first time you see it is off the Brittany coast. The second time you see it near Paris. And then the third time is in central France somewhere. And I was like, you can't move that. So I had to find a place for it to be and to anchor it.
Right.
And there was also what wound up being the climax for my first novel. And Ariosto had being in Bayonne, which is on the Atlantic coast south by Spain. And there was no reason why all these different characters would just happen to meet up in Bayonne. And so I had to move that. So I moved it closer to the forest that I needed. And I made that by Montauban, which is outside of Toulouse. So I chose the small village of Saint-Antoine-de-Nobleval, which has been the site of a few movies lately. Charlotte Gray was done in Saint-Antoine, and also the 100-Foot Journey, which starred Helen Mirren, and it's a lovely movie with food, and so that's in Saint-Antoine-de-Nobleval as well. And that village dates back to the time of the Romans and had a abbey that, according to their town tourist office, was founded by Charlemagne's father, Pepin le Bref. So I used that as my climax for my first novel.
How apropos. And I could definitely see these books up on the big screen.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, it had the action, the love story, the history, and I hope it does happen one day, because you've done quite a bit of the research that goes into this, obviously. And I had never even heard of a historian of science before as a master's. Describe that a little bit, what that means.
So I'm making it sound easier because technically I did it through the interdisciplinary studies program at Sonoma State. And it's a mouthful to say it's an interdisciplinary degrees between the disciplines of history, anthropology, and sociology. And I was for a while a member of the History of Science Society, and there's only a few colleges that actually have a history of science department. And one of those is the University of Wisconsin in Madison. But most historians of science actually have to do it through an interdisciplinary degree, such as York University in Toronto. So I decided to use the historian of science because that's easier to say.
True. Yes, it is. And, you know, another Redwood writer who's no longer with us, but also did her research. I don't know if she was a historian trained like you, but Persia Woolley, you know, with all of her King Arthur books.
Yes.
You guys were friends, obviously.
Yes.
Yes. And I have all of her books as well. She did an incredible amount of research by traveling there just like you did.
Yes,
And traveling to the source, digging up all the information that she could. And then, so if you get a chance, listeners, take a look at her books online, Persia Woolley and Linda McCabe.
Yeah.
Different looks at that time.
Right. So what's interesting is that Persia chose not to use magic. So her Arthurian legend books are actually historical fiction and not fantasy. Whereas
right.
I have magic, I have flying hippogriffs, I have magical realms. So mine are epic historic fantasy. And so
I like that.
There's the difference. Yes. So.
Well, I like fantasy. I'm also a lover of Anne McCaffrey's book, who's also no longer with us, but I loved her books about Pern and the dragons and also the science, because it was actually an advanced society that had crash landed on this planet and they had to learn to adapt to that planet. So that's another great writer of fantasy. So describe a bit about that research again, some of the places that you traveled to. And it sounds like you speak Italian.
We had 2 Italian exchange students that lived with us. So I learned that my hero's name is Ruggiero and not Ruggiero. I was doing more French with the je, but it's je, hard je. So yes, I can at least hack at Italian. And we did go to Italy in 2013, and I went to the city of Ferrara, which is where the poets lived, and they were working for the ruling family, the noble house of Desta in Ferrara, and told these stories for them and their entertainment. So yes.
I just began sharing screen again so that those that are on YouTube can see some of the images of the books that you've written, The Quest of the Warrior Maiden, Fate of the Saracen Knight, and also your Amazon page that shows more about you. And this is Linda C. McCabe, reminding our listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are streaming around the world at kgua.org, and we are live on YouTube today. I'm Leigh Anne Lindsey, your host today, and we have a question from Miss Peggy herself.
Okay.
She wanted to know more about the hippogriff. Describe that a bit more for our listeners.
Sure. The hippogriff was originally mentioned in Virgil's eclogues as an impossible creature because it would mean the mating between two beings or creatures that were mortal enemies of each other. There was the one-eyed Arampsi, and I know I'm mispronouncing that, who were raiders of gold, and they rode on horses, and griffins were the fierce protectors of gold. So horses and griffins were mortal enemies of each other. And so for them to mate and have offspring would be the hippogriff, which is part eagle, part horse. So that was first mentioned in Virgil's Eclogues. And so it's like the symbol of impossible love, which really is the symbol of Bradamante and Ruggiero's love for each other. And Bradamante is like the French pronunciation because she's Frankish, and Bradamante is the Italian. So
exactly, the little spin there.
right, I go back and forth on that. And when I was doing my research, one of the things I did is I passed this by Jeff Stipek, who I know, and he wrote a marvelous book called Becoming Charlemagne, which is Charlemagne as a historical figure. And he did this book looking at the 4 different major empires of the time during his life, which was the Frankish Empire, the Islamic Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the papacy, and how they all came together. And one of the things that Jeff had suggested to me was to not default and use the Italianate names that the poets had used, but to kind of change them to reflect the origins of the characters themselves. So I changed some of the Islamic characters from an Italianate sounding name to more Arabic sounding names. So Agramante became Acramant, and that type of thing. And so Rinaldo da Montalbano, which is the older brother of my heroine, became Renaud de Montalban, since he is French and Frankish and not Italian. So I did some of those changes. And in the back of my book, I have an index of characters, which I tried really hard not to put any spoilers in there, but it will also have the different names. So in case someone is well used to Orlando Furioso and they're going, where's Ronaldo? It's like, you can look up and you're like, oh, that's Renault, okay. And it also has suggested pronunciations, and I give everyone full permission to pronounce it any way you want to, because these are characters that will not know if you are pronouncing it differently than they want it to be pronounced. And they are strange names. And so some of the names I changed, and there were some characters that I added. And in those cases, I had a little more fun to make them the way I wanted to, and try to give some symbolic under meaning to those names as well.
Well put. I admit that when I was reading in the first few chapters, because I had been taught French a little bit when I was younger, I'm going to have to stop this while we're on air.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at that name and thinking, well, it could be Bradamante or it could be Bradamante. And because I could not, but I didn't look at that list. I'll have to go back and look at your list, because those lists are critical in understanding a story, because especially, I remember Anne McCaffrey would do this too. They would put, information about all the characters and locations so that you get a sense, if you got a little bit confused about where you were in time and place, you could check those out.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to give a little more of the historical research. Good. Because I did go to France a couple times, and we spent 2 weeks down the Midi-Pyrenees region near the Toulouse area. But when we were in Paris and we'd spend a week there, there were some things that the poets had included that were not historically correct for the time, including a description of the medieval walls of Paris. And I want to show, for those that are watching this on YouTube, one of the reasons why, and I'll try to describe it for the listeners, as to why I decided to continue to include historically inaccurate walls that weren't there until centuries later. Right. I discovered this and like going, should I change it? Should I not? And so here, I'm going to share the screen and
Okay.
let's stop again. Share. And so
I love the history and the fact that you do pay attention to so much of that detail.
Okay. Well, so here are remnants of the walls from medieval Paris, and this is inside the streets of Paris between some buildings, and if you could walk right past it and not really notice, especially if you're just, walking along Paris. And I think this is on Rue Clovis, and it's close to the Pantheon, not far from Sorbonne on the left bank. And here's a closer up look at the wall. So I had gone to see these walls, but here's a maquette of Roman Paris, and you can see the Ile de la Cité, which is where Lutèce, the Paris first started. And here is the left bank, which there are no walls. And this is the Roman, there's an amphitheater over here. And there's a lot of buildings that could have been ransacked if there was a marauding army. And in fact, the Vikings did not dare attack Paris when Charlemagne was alive. They did not bother him. They did to his grandson, and they ransacked the left bank. So I
remember that being told in actually the TV series Vikings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the maquette of medieval Paris, and these were the walls that were done by Philippe Auguste, as he wanted Paris protected when he went on crusade. And so these walls were started centuries after Charlemagne, and you can see that the left bank is protected. So I had to consider whether or not to take away the walls. And then I was thinking, I already have a really complicated plot. Do I want to just add more complications? And instead, I decided to put a note in the back saying that this was a conscious decision on my part. But the fact is, this war never took place, and we have magical realms and flying hippogriffs, so enjoy.
Good explanation.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Wait, before you did, okay, well, I just want to ask about that wall. Do you know what it was made of, or how high it was, and how far it reached?
Right, I mean, it's 30 feet, I believe. And it's stone. Let me see if I can go, not that one. Not that one. Let's go. Here's you can see how thick the walls were.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that that's as tall as it really was, but there's a historical marker marking that, and I believe it's on Rue Clovis. But there's many different vestiges of the walls around Paris.
When was the last time that you traveled overseas there?
2013 is when we were in Italy, and the last time I was in France was in 2011.
And you are now bringing out the third book in the series?
I'm still writing the third
book. Still writing
the third book. And so I've got a lot more to write. And as you could see from the size of the epic poems, I have a lot of source material. There is a lot cut, but there still is a lot of story to be told. So,
And
yes.
I would like to now just do a little transition to ask a bit about your background in the sea ranch. You are
Okay.
now a full-time sea rancher
Yes.
with your husband, Scott Nevin,
Yes.
and your son, Ian,
Yes.
20-something Ian. And I'd like to know what brought you guys to the sea ranch and a little history there.
So I originally came to Sea Ranch shortly after moving to Sonoma County in 1994. I was on the board for Sonoma County now, and we were going to be revising our bylaws. You know, that's a real caffeine loading thing to do. And can't really do that on a monthly meeting. You need to really sit down and spend a lot of hours on it. And one of our board members had a friend with a house at Sea Ranch. And so they lent it to us for the weekend so we could do that mind-numbing task of revising bylaws. And I came out and I was like, wow, this is really pretty. I think Scott would like this. And so I later rented a house through Kennedy and Associates and brought him out, and I thought he would like it. I didn't know that he would love it. And as soon as he came to Sea Ranch, the gears started going in his head of how we could live here. And we hadn't even bought a house for ourselves in the Santa Rosa area yet.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted to buy here. We couldn't have made it happen with jobs at that time. And that was long time. And so we wound up buying our house in Windsor and moved in 1998. And we bought a lot when my son was 6 months old in 1999. And we couldn't financially make the building of the house happen until we sold our house in Windsor. And we did that when Ian graduated high school. So we started working on the design and everything in 2016. And we sold our house in 2017 when he was graduating high school, moved into an apartment in Santa Rosa. And it took us this long to get the house built, and we've been living here now for 2 months.
So literally Ian grew up with the building of this property, and then the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And he ends up moving in with you.
Yes.
So what an arc for Ian.
Yes, yes. And he kept saying, I'll believe it when I see it. Because we kept talking about it and trying to make it work financially, and it didn't work until we leveraged the equity that we got from living in a house for 20 years in Windsor to be able to do it. So we don't have a mortgage. We have the house paid free and clear.
Excellent. And the sweat equity that you put into that place, I'm thankful for being shown around the other day. It's beautiful, the work that you guys have done, and the marble that you sourced for the kitchen, and the way that you've designed it. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
That does show many years of planning and preparation and a lot of hard work. So now you are full-timers as of 2 months ago.
Yes.
And you were staying on my street there for a while until you could move in.
Right. We wound up having to live nearby so that we could do the sweat equity and not have to drive 2 hours home to Santa Rosa. So it wound up working out that way. So yeah.
And Ian's going to be, or is going to, San Francisco State now. What?
He is via Zoom, and in August he is scheduled to go and live in campus housing. So
oh, really?
Yes.
Well, that was my university, that in San Mateo College and Colorado Mountain College. So I did a long trip, but I ended up at San Francisco State in the business school. But he's not going to be in the business school side. He's done a lot of debate, but what exactly is he?
He's a communications major.
Communications major.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if you are just tuning in again, this is Linda McCabe, author of a trilogy set in the Charlemagne era, Quest of the Warrior Maiden and Fate of the Saracen Knight. And
Yes.
she's working on the final and third book. I'm
Yes.
your host today, Leigh Anne Lindsey on Peggy's Place. This is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are streaming around the world at kgua.org with our Radio Rethink app called Air Pocket. It's easy to take with you wherever you go, anywhere in the world. And we're on Radio Garden and TuneIn, and we are live on YouTube today. So, and we are talking, as I said, with this author, Linda McCabe, who I had met actually in Santa Rosa at Redwood Writers many years ago when I was part of it back in 2011.
Right.
2011, when you were doing the traveling and
Yes. So
research for this book.
Let me show a few more
Sure.
research things, because this one is really fun. When I had learned that they're going through the Michelin guides and trying to figure out where to set things, and I chose St. Antonin because there was an abbey. When we went to St. Antonin to see it, let me show you desktop. So here is the marker of the abbey. It says 8th century, and this was founded by Pepin le Bref. So this is the marker for it. Now, this.
Wait. When you say marker for it, what do you mean by marker?
This is a historical marker.
Okay.
The ancient abbey from the 8th century. And this is all that remains. These few little rocks here.
Oh, no.
Which means that I have freedom to describe it in any way that fits my dramatic needs. And I forgot to mention that with the walls, the inaccurate walls from medieval Paris, is that when I am faced with the choice between historical accuracy and dramatic needs, trying to weigh those out, I will go with dramatic needs every time.
I thought you would say that.
I feel that the worst sin you can commit as a writer is to bore your readers. And so go with drama and then put a footnote or an endnote to explain the reasons that you're not just doing shoddy research. So yeah. And when I was doing in St. Antonin, I found, let me show you this. They had this downspout, and it was over a doorway, and it's of Jonah and the whale. And so in the poem, there was a fountain that was described, and it was this big fountain, and it just was unwieldy. And so I wasn't going to use that, but I needed a magical fountain. And so I decided to describe it as Jonah and the whale in honor of this architectural, archaeological remnant of the old abbey that is still in St. Antonin.
Now that looks like it's almost an upside down woman there, but is
yes,
that the
and
way?
at first I thought it was a lion with a lion's mane. Those are waves and not curls from a lion's mane.
Oh, and I see the teeth now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So that's Jonah in the whale's mouth and not a dude in a lion's mouth, as I first thought. But
got it. Now, tell us a little bit about the magic part of your books.
So there are magical realms, and there is one part where Ruggiero is taken to a magical realm, and there is a woman who is an evil sorceress, and archetypically she's based on Circe from Greek mythology. And I was not satisfied with what Ariosto did to punish her. And so I decided to bring in some heavyweights from Greek mythology to do so. And so I brought 7 deities from the Greek pantheon who are the most feared deities, and none of them are Olympians. There's
That's hard to do.
two sets of three and one single, and they're all women.
Cool.
Yes. And so for those, I'm like, who is that? I included the Pyrenees, or Avenging Furies, Nemesis, and the Three Fates.
I've heard of the Avenging Furies and the Three Fates. I hadn't heard of the other one.
Nemesis. She's
Nemesis.
a beautiful
Nemesis.
woman who went after those who offended the gods. And so she went after the living. And that's when you hear Nemesis, she was a beautiful goddess who had wings and wore a whip on her belt, and she went after people.
Well, it sounds like Wonder Woman.
Yes, yes. So anyway, she and Avenging Furies would go after people who had crimes, and they did that. There were three sisters. They had snakes for hair and blood dripping down their fangs and eyes and stuff like that. And they were hideous looking monsters. And they would go after people both living and after they died in the underworld.
So how did you tie them into your book? Both books, I guess. They
yes.
tie through.
You do actually see them again in the underworld in the second book.
Because I haven't gotten that far yet in the book.
Yes.
So.
Well, yeah, the underworld is in the sequel, as is a spectacular magical ride to the moon and back, which is in Orlando Furioso. I had to include that. And let me just say, Orlando Furioso, the title character Orlando, in French is Roland. He, in Orlando Innamorato, was in love with a Saracen princess, Angelica. And in Orlando Furioso, he realizes that she is not in love with him. And in fact, it's unrequited love, and she has given herself to another, has fallen in love with another. And then he goes crazy, Furioso, loses his wits and uproots trees and just goes crazy. That title storyline did not really impress me that much. I just couldn't identify with Angelica, because archetypically she's like Helen of Troy, where all these men are in love with her. And it's just like, I don't feel that. I don't identify with that. And Bradamante, she archetypically is a cross between Athena and Joan of Arc. And I found that much more attractive. And so I was being drawn to that storyline. So I am elevating that storyline. And Orlando is still a character, but he is not even a tertiary character, more of a quaternary character. So he's still there, but not as important in my story.
Okay, you used a couple of words there that I want you to describe a little bit more. Tertiary. Tertiary.
Primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary.
Okay, so
yeah.
Does that mean like fourth or?
Yes. And then there's ancillary characters, which is way further down. So okay. He's still important, and he is a cousin, a kinsman of my heroine. But
so we have a few minutes left here in Peggy's Place. Why don't you describe perhaps the book that you're working on and what you're working through?
Yes, I am working on the third installment of this trilogy, and I have so many details in it. It will take a while for me to finish it. And I have a working title, which is Fight for the Warrior Bride.
Fight for the Warrior Bride.
Yes.
And so you started out with Quest of the Warrior Maiden, and then Fate of the Saracen Knight,
yes,
who gets into the underground apparently.
Yes.
And then and so what are some of the challenges that you're working through?
Oh, just trying to get everything to work, and I have so many details to do. So anyway, I want to mention that my author name is Linda C. McCabe, and I use that because there are other women who share my first and last name that are authors. One is a geneticist,
Ah,
and another one does marketing. So it's Linda C. McCabe. And if anyone wants to join my mailing list, they can do that by going to my website, lindacmccabe.com, or questofthewarriormaiden.com. And my books are available at Four-Eyed Frog Books in
oh,
Walla.
good.
Yes, and they are
Great.
signed. And if anyone wants a personalization, I will be happy to do that. Just work with Four-Eyed Frogs. And since I'm local, I can come and sign them and take care of that. So if you want to give a birthday gift to someone and you want me to say, happy birthday, Fred, I can do that. So we can do that. And
And
so
Mother's
Four-Eyed
Day is
Frogs.
coming up, so that'll be a good gift for
Yes.
Mom's Day, for any
Yes.
of your friends, even if you no longer have a mom that's still living like me. But
Yeah.
anybody can pick up this book at Four-Eyed Frog Books. And this is Linda C. McCabe, author. And what else did you want to say as far as contact? Why don't you give your email again?
Right. Linda McCabe at gmail.com. And if anyone wants, if they're in a book club, I have questions at the back of my book to spur conversation. And I would be glad to join by Zoom and show more pictures from my research trips to anyone if they want a conversation. I've done those before and they're a lot of fun.
Really?
Yes. And I also did a talk back in December for Four-Eyed Frog Books, and that's on my YouTube channel. So you can find that, and I'll have a link, and I'll give that to you so you can put a link in the recording of this for anyone who wants to see that.
What a great thing for our community for you to do that kind of thing, especially because people really get into books and they have the opportunity to talk to the author, the writer of these worlds that you pull them into is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Linda C. McCabe, for joining us on Peggy's Place today. And I'm so glad you and Scott and Ian moved to the Sea Ranch full time. And as long as Ian will be able to be here with us, he might even come in and help volunteer at the station. We're going to talk about that. And Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. Okay.
All right. You take care. And that will do it for Peggy's Place. I'm Leigh Anne Lindsey, and this is KGUA in Walla 88.3 FM. We are streaming around the globe at kgua.org and on our Air Pocket app, which you will see on the main page when you log in. And I'm going to say goodbye to our YouTube watchers right now, and to Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.